Biofuels were introduced as a way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions compared to conventional transport fuels. UK government figures say that biofuels cut emissions by 50 to 60%. Why then are these good guys often seen as bad guys? A formidable coalition of campaigners is warning that far from helping to reverse climate change, the UK's biofuel revolution will speed up global warming and the loss of vital habitat worldwide. It seems much has to do with the source of the material which is turned into biofuel. Could bioethanol produced from crops like wheat, barley and maize be the salvation for biofuel's green image?
Growing bioethanol crops in Europe will allow us to reduce our reliance on biofuels that are coming from crops and places in the world that have their own problems. Those problems could be that tropical rainforests are being chopped down to allow the planting of other types of crops that produce bioethanol, and those problems could be that those people are using land which could be used for food for bioethanol.
Since April 2008, all road transport fuel sold in the UK must include 2.5% biofuel. UK legislation will increase that to 5% by 2010. Then the reduction in CO2 will be equivalent to taking 1 million cars off the road. Campaigners are calling for a legally binding target to ensure that all biofuels save at least 60% more carbon than they produce. The people who make bioethanol from wheat claim that target is easily exceeded.
The carbon footprint for wheat grown as a biofuel is very positive. Our calculations are that the reduction in carbon emissions is about 70%.
Some opponents claim that bioethanol crops will damage the environment. The producers, though, say they operate under strict guidelines. The British model of biofuel production brings greenhouse gas savings unlike biofuels produced elsewhere in the world, where there are fewer environmental savings, according to the National Farmers Union.
Because it's grown here, we know we can monitor the environmental impact. We can make sure we're not taking out rainforests, for example. We are looking after the biodiversity and wildlife at the same time.
There's a growing global food crisis. Prices are rising dramatically. In some parts of the world, staples like wheat and rice have gone up by as much as 70% over the past year. Won't growing wheat for biofuel increase prices even further?
Undoubtedly, biofuels can have some influence on food prices in any one single crop year because it's about demand. But over time, as farmers plan to grow more and build their stocks, biofuels will have an extremely limited impact on food prices.
The advantage of using wheat for fuel is the byproduct, concentrated protein, perfect as animal feed.
It's a high protein feed, so ideal for using as a cattle finishing product. It may well form part of a change in the way we actually rear our cattle. We may have herds of suckler cattle rearing young stock, with those young stock actually being moved nearer to where the bioethanol is being produced and stock being finished nearer to plant. May change the way the industry works.
For a number of years we've had set aside. We've almost thought the land was unimportant, and with low prices farmers have not been producing as much as we could. Now for the last few years we've had production falling, but with higher prices, with new markets, we believe British agriculture can produce at least 3 or 4 million tonnes that it doesn't require for food that could actually go into a biofuel market. That'd be great for farming, it'd be great for transport fuels as well, because what we would be doing is making the full potential of our land as a resource.
We can import some ethanol from other countries. It's a viable alternative and there are some good biofuels from other countries. But if we think about energy security, why would we just want, when we can produce our own perfectly good ethanol, just to import all our energy needs as we have to do with some of the other things? We don't have to do that with ethanol.
So why then is there so much controversy over biofuels?
I think it's down to a number of pressure groups who have their own particular agendas, and probably emphasis being placed on the bad biofuels, the potential impact on taking grassland or woodland or rainforest and turning that into to crops for biofuel production with a negative impact both on the environment and potentially on the carbon output from taking that land out of production.
Why can't more use be made of non-food raw materials like wood chippings and straw?
Second generation biofuels, people have been talking about them for a long time, and they're going to be important in the mix, but you cannot get to second generation without starting with first generation, building a market structure, building the infrastructure around producing biofuels in the first place. It's going to be a progression and a journey, not just a destination.
The government needs to introduce targets for sustainability in regards to the biofuels sector, and it needs to distinguish between those biofuels that are good biofuels and bad biofuels. In our case, we're using wheat sustainably to create bioethanol, and at the same time we're improving the UK's food security because we're reducing our reliance on food imports for use in animal feed.
Will bioethanol really help reduce energy input and greenhouse gas emission? It seems that the story is more complicated than some of the opponents suggest. By using wheat and other so-called good biofuel crops to produce bioethanol, scientists say the carbon situation will improve, which would mean that the original spirit behind the idea of biofuels lives on.
When we start on a journey, that we can first of all use the grains from this crop, but ultimately we should be able to use the straw, other biomass, and we are absolutely convinced that in the long run we will need a very strong biofuel sector here in the United Kingdom.